In this video tutorial, we will be making this Autumn Visions beginner embroidery piece. Let's begin by separating the threads. Cut about an arm's length of embroidery floss. Hold one of the ends and begin tapping gently with one of your fingers. Pinch and pull out one of the threads all the way until you've gotten to the very end. Make sure to always pull only one thread out at a time so that you do not create knots. Next, we will thread our needle. Take all of the ends of the separated threads and bring them together. Push them through the eye of the needle gently. Pull the ends of those threads all the way until you meet the opposite ends of the threads. Next, we will tie a knot at the end of the thread. Cross the ends of the thread behind your needle to make a lowercase t. Loop the threads around the needle 2 or 3 times, pinch the looped sections, and begin to pull until you've dragged the knot all the way to the end of the thread. Let's begin with the satin stitch for the leaves. Bring the needle up through the back of the fabric. Come back down through the center of the leaf. For each succeeding stitch, make them close together so that the stitches are parallel. You can begin to follow the lines on the leaf if you would like to create the illusion of the veins of the leaves. When you get about 4 or 5 inches from the end of the thread, you'll want to secure a knot by pushing the needle underneath one of the last stitches you created so that you have a loop on the other side. Bring the needle back through that loop, either using the eye of the needle or the pointed part of the needle. Repeat this step 2 to 3 times to secure your knot in place. Then trim off the excess ends. For the first section of the pumpkin, we will be using 2 strands of light orange and 1 strand of yellow. We will still be using the satin stitch. Try to follow the lines that are drawn on each section of the pumpkin for the direction in which you want to create your stitches. For the next 2 sections of the pumpkin, we will be using 3 strands of light orange thread. For the remaining sections of the pumpkin, we will be using 2 strands of light orange and 1 strand of light brown. Next, we will move on to the gourd using 2 strands of green and 1 strand of light brown. For the next section of the gourd, we will use 2 strands of yellow and 1 strand of light brown. Next, we will be using 1 strand of dark brown and 1 strand of green for the stems. We will be using a stem stitch. Bring the needle up from the back of the fabric and back down again, but do not pull taut, leave a loop. Bring the needle back up through the fabric about halfway between the 2 holes through which the thread is sticking through the fabric. You are going to repeat this step to continue making this stitch, leaving a loop coming halfway between up with the needle before making your next stitch. If you would like to fill in the spaces between the lines of the stem stitch, you can use a satin stitch. For the petals of the flowers, we will be using a looped blanket stitch. Bring the needle up from the back of the fabric and back down again, leaving a loop. Do not pull the thread taut. Bring the needle back up again about halfway between the 2 points of the stitches you just created. Hold onto the loop so that it does not become flush with the fabric. You want to keep the loop. You will repeat this going all the way around the outside of the flower to create the petals. You will essentially be creating rings of petals going from the outside of the circle to the inside of the circle. After you have gotten about halfway into the center of the flower, switch to the light orange thread. For the center of the flowers, we will be using a French knot with yellow thread. Bring the needle up through the center of one of the flowers. Hold the thread taut about an inch away from the fabric. Loop the thread around the needle 2 or 3 times. Push the needle back down through the same spot in the fabric, pulling the thread back down through the other side until it creates a little knot. You will repeat this step as many times as you would like to create the center of the flowers. For the wind lines, we will be using a running stitch with the dark brown thread. Bring your needle up from the back of the fabric at the end of one of the short lines. Bring it back down again through the fabric on the opposite side of that line. Repeat this for all of the little lines. Using the satin stitch and dark brown thread, fill in the tiny oval at the end of the gourd. If you are creating the version that has words, we will be using a combination of a straight stitch and the back stitch for the letters. Use a straight stitch for all the areas that are straight. Use a back stitch for all of the letters that have curves. For the back stitch, bring the needle up from the back of the fabric at the end of the letter. Bring the needle back down again about 1/4 inch away. Bring the needle back up again about 1/4 inch away from your last stitch. Then bring the needle back down through the end of the last stitch you created. Repeat this step until you have finished the letter. Our last step is to secure the fabric on the back of the piece using the running stitch. This is the only time we will not be creating a knot at the end of our thread. Leave a tail of about 4 or 5 inches of thread, then continue going around the hoop with the running stitch until you've made it all the way back around. Once you've come all the way back around, pull the 2 ends of thread and tie a knot. Trim the excess thread. Congratulations on finishing your piece.